So this is part two. Actually, the computer died in the middle of the last one, so sorry about that. But it's kind of suitable because we're getting into a different realm where we're going to get a lot more technical with the language. So the first thing that you should really note is just like in picture books, graphic novels come having a variety of artistic styles, or what they, or what uh, McLeod would call the icon. It can come from being naturalistic to being painterly, to being computer generated, to being pop art. It ranges. There's also the issue about the universality of the cartoon, which when we talk more about understanding comics, we'll get into that. But mixed levels of abstraction. Some artists even mix levels of abstraction. Here we have a more realistic background with highly iconic figures in the foreground. So the visual vocabulary. This is just a smattering, and we'll get more into it. But so sequential art. So some of the major terms to know is the grid, and that's the layout of the panels, and the panels are the individual pictures. Gutter, that's definitely a term that we've heard a lot, and we use it in picture books as well. So the panels, the images that are usually laid out with borders, are known as the panels. The grid, the layout of the panels. The panel frames, the border or edges of a panel when drawn are called frames. They are normally rectangular in shape, but they can be of other shapes, and they are sometimes. So what would be the gutter? The gutters would be the blank or the areas of nothingness between the panels. The cloud-shaped panel can indicate a flashback or a dream sequence. Whilst one with a jagged edge can be used to convey anger or shock. And you can look at that. That's in the left-hand corner. So if the frame is like a cloud sequence, often that is trying to convey that it's like a dream sequence. And again, we use the term full bleed, is usually used on comic book cover, and is when the art is allowed to run to the edge of each page rather than having a white border around it. Bleeds are sometimes, used on internal panels to create an illusion of space or emphasize action. A splash. A page splash is a full page drawing in a comic book, often used at the first page of a story and includes the title and credits. The interior splash page. Splashes that are not on the first page of the story. Interior splashes may or may not include title or credits. Splash panel. A panel that is larger than others on the page. So you can see on the right side, the splash panel 2/3 of the page. So it's a large splash panel on the top of the page. On the bottom of the page, it's smaller. And this actually is often to connote, also can motion or time, or not just predominance, or in terms of what should be receiving more attention. Splash that appears across 2 pages of a comic book is called a double splash or 2-page spread, not unlike what we went over in picture books. Motion lines, lines that are used to represent motion. Line length may be said to be very proportionally to the rate of the speed of the object moving. So you can see outlined in the yellow, the little mouse is dancing. And then we have the floating cutout, which is in the blue border. And see the full bleed. That's actually a taken directly from the book. Oh, the comic, very famous comic. Ooh, we'll get back to it. But it's in the orange. It's a full bleed with the revolver straight. Oh, Yummy, which was I noted in the first. And the first part of this is a kind of controversial graphic novel. And as you can see, so the varying panel sizes, that's in the purple block right there. and it's noting motion. It's showing their fight. And you can see the grid in 2 rows and the green border. Okay, moving on. So textual style and vocabulary. So there's the narrative box. So it's like captions. So it's the city of Townsville. These captions are not, they're not what's being said. It's either, you know, sometimes they can note what's being inside somebody's mind, but they're not being said out loud. They're there to provide context. There's thought balloons, literally look like thought balloons. Symbolia, which is usually, you know, it's symbols noting, like if there's a bunch of asterisks or, you know, some sort of, you know, Z's noting kind of sleeping. There's also can be spike balloons that can note, you know, if you're crashing into something. There's word balloons, speech bubbles, and of course the use of sound effects. And you can see, I also noted that a use of sound effect like whack. There's a car being whacked into the full play that panel right there. The speech or word balloon, also known as the speech bubble, is a graphic used to assign ownership or dialogue on a particular character. Bubbles, which represent an internal dialogue, usually, are referred to as thought balloons. The shape of the balloon will indicate the type of dialogue contained within it. Thought balloons, you know, can take on a variety of shapes. Here are, you know, so we get a little bit. I wanted to zoom in on this. Variations of balloon shapes are many, and new ones are being invented all the time. So there's someone yelling, "Timber!" And to note a kind of yelling, not only do they use the exclamation points, but they're using a spiked balloon. Or, hee 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 hee, and it's a kind of, you know, to kind of make that an ominous looking balloon. It's got this, you know, kind of weird, I don't even know, like, it's like nebulous. So you can see how all those can be used. And then, while inside those balloon, symbols are constantly being appropriated or invented to cover nonverbal. So we've seen, you know, when, like, you know, Bugs Bunny or someone, or the Roadrunner, like, knocks himself into something, and then there'll be various symbols that'll come out of his head to note that, like, he's gone unconscious. So they're just getting more and more varied. You know, Scott Cloud goes into even the variations of lettering styles, both in and out of the balloon, speak of an ongoing struggle to capture the very essence of sound. So, you know, when we talk about poetry, we talk about onomatopoeia. So in comics, you know, in graphic novels, there is a lot of onomatopoeia. There's going to be crash or crack or whap. And that's usually a sound that's going to be sounded out loud. The speech bubbles are usually only given to be able to show ownership of speech. If there's nothing around the words, it means that it's not being owned. It means that it's something that's being shared, something that can be heard out loud. Didactic sound, you could call it, or diactic sound. There's various ways of referring to it. So it's important to note that we find many aspects of filmmaking combined with the text of a graphic novel. Ideas such as camera angles, lighting, and flashback are all found nestled in this form. And mise-en-scene is something that comes straight from cinematography. And mise-en-scene is, you know, how a scene is laid out in terms of the background, the foreground, and how the composition is thought of, but as in moving, it's not static. And graphic novel, it's not static either. There is a movement there. And again, there's montage. The sequence in which frames or lack thereof are ready may vary from reader to reader, thus leading to varied interpretations. How does reading make it into the graphic novel? Take the mise-en-scene, a cinematic study of the image frame or panel. This is a montage where many things are happening at once. What frames do you read first? So when you read this, it's everything happening at once. You're seeing the very middle picture, but then you're getting close-ups as border. So you're seeing that it's a montage. It's all happening at once. framing, and this is something that's important. And if you take photography or cinematography, you learn that framing is one of the quintessential things that the cinematographer, the artist, has to lead the viewers into the story. So it's a device which you can grab the reader and guide them through the right shot, and say and point to look through it. So along with this, McLeod also goes in with framing. There's a choice of moment that goes into framing, a choice of frame, meaning a point of view, and a choice of image in terms of how it's going to be rendered, the style, the and the various things you're going to include compositionally in that image. So framing, points of view. So we have here, and I used a page out of Understanding Comics, and I'll do a couple close-ups of those. So the long view, or the establishing shot, it tells the reader where she is before zooming into the character. I used an example from, I don't know why I used this example, from Fred and the Flintstones, but we see Fred and he's jumping into a hammock, and we see that he's like somewhere in the lawn. An establishing shot is you have to see more than the character. You have to see where the character is and where they're coming from. Like if they're coming out of a house, or or if they're like in the water, we need to see some sort of environment. There's another establishing shot on the right of the page. I'm not sure if it's too blurry. It's from Pride of Baghdad, but it's an establishing view shot, giving a reader a sense of place. And you're seeing a kind of an overview of all the animals in the zoo, and from a long shot, from an establishing shot, before we zoom in. Then we get the zoom in. So you're seeing usually a close-up of that person. Then we see Mickey Mouse. There's the full body shot. So we're seeing Mickey from his head down to his toes. And then there's the medium view shot, which is from your, it's from, like, it's shoulders up. So the close-up is usually, you can say something zooming in, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a close-up. Usually when you're referring to a close-up, you're referring to something that's really close up, like the shot of an eye. So here again, this is the establishing shot. We're seeing Scott, and we're seeing like where he is. So we know that there's a house in the background. He's in the foreground. We can see a soccer ball. We can see him that he's next to a tree. So then we get the long shot. The long shot, you get a full body view of the protagonist, and you usually get at least a little bit of an establishment of where they are. He's leaning on a tree. So then, we look at these various panels, and we see that the medium shot is him and his it's the same size as the close-up of his face, as you're seeing. The panel's the same size. We're talking about how much of the actual protagonist, or the person, or whatever you're looking at, inanimate object, you're being able to see. So we're being able to see from like kind of his shoulders up. With the medium shot, the close-up, we're just kind of getting his eyes. And then we zoom out, and then we're getting a full body shot, again, of him. And we're seeing him next to the tree. So framing perspective. This is where, if you have a background in photography or art, it can really be helpful. So there's bird's eye view. Bird's eye view is really looking overhead. And we see that in the left-hand corner. We also, there is a sort of bird's eye view that's happening in the first, in the very top of the full page splash that's on there. Or, it's taking up a very large splash section, about 3/4 maybe. And it's high angle, so you're getting, it's kind of, it's on an angle, but it's also bird's eye. You can argue either way. Then there's the eye level shot, meaning you're getting them eye level. You're not looking down, you're not looking up. Then there's low angle. You're looking up, and these are all done for a reason, and we'll look at it, and we'll look at that a little closer with some examples. And then you can get a slight high angle and a slight low angle, and then there's the Dutch angle. And Usually, you see a lot of Dutch angles if you watch a lot of French movies, like in when they're trying to do make moments that really dramatic. You can see it in action shots when they're really dramatic. The low Dutch angle you see there, I think we're going to see another low Dutch angle, so we'll get more into that. But Dutch simply means that it's on an angle, literally. And the high angle, you're looking down. Low angle, you're looking up. So low angle, what does this do? So we're looking up at this person or this monster, whatever he is. What does having a low angle do? Well, obviously it makes him kind of foreboding. It makes him loom it. This, as far as we know, this character could be 5 feet tall. We have no idea. But because we're looking up at him, because the picture is looking up at him, he's looking ominous to us. He's looking that he's taller than us. And in reality, he could be a dwarf, for all we know. We have no idea. When I say dwarf, I mean a character, not a little person. So then we can look at another version of this. So this is a low Dutch angle. So first, why are we looking up at her? And why is it kind of on a Dutch shot? Well, we're looking, it's giving you a different kind of, it's definitely not giving, I wouldn't say it's giving you the same kind of ominous kind of feeling that the other one, but it's definitely giving her predominance, giving her a certain level of our respect. Dutch angle is kind of making it creepy. I think, which is that's what it's used for a lot of the time, is to make pictures more dynamic. But if you look at it and she's on that angle, it's making her and the environment around her look not her ominence, but the environment and the composition. We're seeing that she's with another person. We're not seeing exactly who that person is, but composition-wise, the elbow is in there due to the Dutch angle, and we're just seeing that looks like she's in an environment that isn't exactly safe. Not that she's not necessarily a safe person, but it's the environment around her that I think is the reason that they're using the Dutch angle. Again, these are all subjective. There's no wrong or right here. You can certainly have your own opinion about why someone would be using a Dutch angle or a low angle. But low angles usually are used to definitely feature the person or the protagonist or antagonist as either being larger than life, being ominous. It's definitely to put an emphasis on them. This is a high angle, so we're looking down. So why would you use a high angle? Lots of reasons. Number one, it gives you a kind of omnipresence as a reader. You're able to see a lot of what's going on. I wouldn't say it's below you, but it literally is below you. The action is below you. You have become an all-knowing being. You get to see a lot more of the action. That could be a reason. But these are all, when someone draws like this or takes these sorts of panels, they definitely, there's always a reason behind it. And usually when you're reading something and you're trying to discern it, and you'll see this when you're reading The Arrival, he uses all kinds of angles to give you different kinds of interpretations. So we'll definitely deconstruct that more. So here we have some devices. As we see, I show the zoom in and the zoom out, what that can be used for. So for the first one, you get the establishing kind of shot in the beginning, and then they zoom in to focus on the characters that they want to. Then there's the zoom out, which is, again, you can get, this is what you're concentrating on, but as you zoom out, you can get more of an establishing. Also, it's an issue of, pacing. If you look there, the graphic novels have their way of pacing, mainly through panel size. Small panels are equated with short film shots. The more panels there are, the faster the events within the sequence. And then we also see parallel editing. As you can see, if you look on the right side of the page, you're not only getting what's going on in the larger environment, but if you see, I know it's kind of small, but if you look at the outlined in white graphic, you're also getting you know, a look into something that's happening elsewhere that has something to do with the main narrative. But again, as we've talked about parallel plots, you know, it's giving you parallel editing, which is something you can do visually as well as narratively in graphic novels. So this is the big graphic novel terminology page. I'll make this available to everybody online just so they have it. It's constantly changing, and more various terms are being added every day. It's good to just have a fundamental understanding. And you know, what's helpful is a lot of the picture book terminology does follow over in terms of gutters and things like that, and full bleeds. Splashes, that's unique to graphic novels and comics. You know, the idea of the icon. Perspective, point of view, you know, in terms of devices and phrasing and framing, you know, that can be a little hard to get if you know cinematography, it's definitely a way in. And you know, floating cutout, an image not contained in a panel. As we know, cutout, that's what a cutout is in picture books. So I'll make this available to people. You can also, you know, as picture books get more and more postmodern, they're starting to use more and more of these kinds of devices. So these various terms end up being, you know, important to try to describe picture books sometimes too. So to go over textual: speech balloons, thought balloons, narrative captions, sound effects, and symbiosis. So, and remember, cloud-shaped panel indicating a flashback or dream sequence. Gutters, grid. So I will leave this up. I'll upload it to the Moodle so you guys have it for the future and in general. How to read a graphic novel page. Graphic novels are read left to right, just like traditional texts. So it's kind of showing you, this is changing, because graphic novels are due to how large a panel would be, you might read it differently. But it's showing you you're reading, you know, right to left, up to down. This changes. Sometimes you read it, you know, not a vertical but a horizontal. So we'll look at that more. So dialogue. What characters say to each other, conveyed through word balloons. Each word balloon has a tail to let you know who is talking. So here we got Superman, and he's having a thought. He's not saying it out loud, and he's saying, "And to the battle is not over for good." So these are the panels, and within the panels, you know, you get to see what she's saying. So the various tales are connected to her. And again, so what we just went through is actually, we're reading this more vertically than we are horizontally. So you're starting from the very top of the page and you're going down. And you're taking note. If you see the second panel down, those are two different girls having two different reactions. But again, you have to note that the various speech balloons are directed towards them. So in total, you would say you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels make up this particular grid. So it's just showing you again, you know these 5 panels and how the various balloons are being used, speech balloons. So what to look for in words and pictures. In the captions and word balloons, some words are emphasized by being bigger or bolder than others. This lets the reader know that there's a lot of emotion behind these specific words. So a graphic novel page, just to go over again. Pages consist of a variety of elements: panels, squares or rectangulars that show in a single scene. Gutters, the space between the panels. Dialogue balloons contain communication between among characters. Thought balloons contain a character's thoughts. Captions contain information about a scene or character. Remember, captions can sometimes contain omniscient information, like what a person's thinking and whatnot. But again, you need some sort of tail or thought balloon to know that it's for a particular individual. And sound effects, visual sound clues, i.e. wonk, ponk. So this is the first page of Mouse. So what words are being emphasized? What are being communicated? So the word balloon. So it's word balloon 2, word balloon 3, word balloon 4, word balloon 5, word balloon 6, and it's just kind of showing you. So he's saying ow in word balloon 2. So that's a sound. It's a sound effect onomatopoeia. You know, in word balloon 1, there's the emphasis being put on the last word egg because it's in caps. Again, rotten egg in word balloon 4 is being in caps. So it's just being very attentive to what is being emphasized is important to be able to decode the overall interpretation of the graphic novel. Do you know how to read a graphic novel? Are there any certain strategies? So word balloons. Again, how do you know which word balloons to read first? Honestly, you don't. It's something that once you get used to reading graphic novels, or it comes over time. I believe this is taken from Ghost World. I'm not sure, but you know, it's showing that you would read the first one that's you know, the most highest up. Then second you would read yeah, and then you would read the response, which would be 3, and then you would go from up to bottom again, which would be the one, you know, number 4 and then number 5. So again, it's not a left to right here. It's an up to down, and sometimes it can be difficult and complicated to figure out, you know, which order to read them in. You know, half this page is various people speaking, and then on the other half you get a story, but you're storyboarding again, you know, vertically, not horizontally. So the basic right rule still applies to the panels. You're reading this you're definitely reading the larger splash first. Then you're going to be going from up to down. So then you go 2, 3, 4. So for word balloons 2, you know, what's on top, you read that first and then second. So whatever's higher, especially if you're reading from top to bottom, you're going to read that first, and the responses are going to come after that. So, what are the major types of graphic novels? Superhero story, manga, nonfiction, adaptions, or spin-off, satire, fantasy, personal narratives. So, let's get manga. So, types of graphic novels, manga. How to read a manga page. Okay, so it's unlike a traditional book. Manga is read backwards from back to front. Often, if you start at what looks like the front of the manga, you will see a message like this, saying, stop, don't read it here, read the other way. So, panel order and dialogue boxes. Panels and dialogue balloons are read reversed. So, you're going to be reading from an opposite direction. So you're going to be reading, we usually read left to right, we're going to be reading right to left. So as you can see, the balloons are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. You're still going up and down though. So it's something to get used to. And manga is reversed like this because it comes from a different culture, obviously. So the way that they read their particular language, Mandarin, you know, is usually vertical from top to bottom. So it's a different way of reading, and hence their graphic novels are going to translate differently. Types of graphic novels, manga terms. So they have various themes that go throughout manga. And I'm not going to try to pronounce these because I know that I will just murder them. But these are various terminologies that comes from the manga world. So anime, so that's Japan. So the illustrations are computer generated often, usually animated cartoons rather than print cartoons, and detailed backgrounds. So manga is Mandarin, China, and anime is Japan. Now a little history about graphic novel. So the history of graphic novels. 1954, Seduction of the Innocent published, Comics Code Authority created. In 1978, excuse me, I have a little bit of cold. Eisner, Contract to God came out. And then Frank Miller writes The Dark Knight Returns in 1986. 1987, Alan Moore writes The Watchmen. Now, you know what really broke history was the writing of Mouse, which was won the Pulitzer Prize in 1982. It was written by by Spiegelman, and it's about Holocaust and its representations in one family. And often, Mouse, if you do take, especially in undergraduate school, if you take a course about the Holocaust, or if you take a course that involves history, Mouse is a text that is often assigned as any other textbook. So it's, it really broke, the glass ceiling for graphic novels when it won the Pulitzer, but it's definitely continuing to make its way into various courses at the college level. Names to know: Eisner Awards and the Harvey Awards, formerly the Kirby Awards. It's like the Oscars of comics and graphics. The novel industry, these organizations recognize the year's best writers, artists, publications, inkers, stories for specific audiences. To find good reading, try starting here at the Harvey and Eisner Awards. So now we're getting into understanding comics, and this is the 6 layers that Scott McCloud outlines in his book: idea and purpose, form, idiom, structure, craft, and surface. So this is one of the fundamental books on really getting to understand comics, graphic novels, and being able to deconstruct them. I do recommend, if you intend on teaching graphic novels, you do purchase this book and you become familiar with it. So one thing to understand is to truly understand comics, first you probably gonna have to misunderstand them. So it's not, a lot of the time, people are going to not be completely understanding of the aesthetics, the history, and even the various ways of reading them. And that's okay. But the whole point of it is that you will eventually get to the place where you can appreciate them and move that appreciation over to your students. That it's not just trashy stuff that you read. In the in the newspaper, you just take the comics page. That graphic novels, they're literature. And consisting of steps: idea, purpose, form, idiom, structure, craft, and surface, as we said before. So Scott opens up with idea and purpose: the impulses, the ideas, the emotions, the philosophies, the purposes of the work, the work's content. Second, the form. It will take. Will it take a book, a chalk drawing, a chair, a song, a sculpture, a potholder, a comic book? Third, the school of art, the vocabulary of styles, of gestures, or subject matter, the genre he refers to. And this is what he refers to in terms of the idiom that's being used, that the work belongs to. Fourth, the structure, putting all together what to include, what to leave out, how to arrange, how to compose the work. So here we see it in the form of an apple: the surface, the craft, the structure, the idiom, the form, the idea. So as they are innate to art itself, these 6 layers can also be applied to video games. So it's a framework proposed by McCloud's definition, and so it's all goes to in terms of the production values in the surface, in the craft, constructing the work, applying the skills of practical knowledge. The 5th layer is the realization of the concepts of the 4th layer, the structure, and as such describes the concrete elements that make up the various the composition of the work. The aspects exclusively defined, in terms of balance, difficulty, control. The key distinction can be fuzzy between structure and craft is that later describes execution. For instance, I'm sure if we're going to be talking about, let's say we're talking about video games, if we played a game with a terrific concept that has ultimately made worse by sloppy controls, steep difficulty curves, and poor level design. In other words, craft is to structure as engineering is to science. Structure, putting it all together, what to include, what to leave out, how to arrange it, how to compose the work. Idiom, the school of art, the vocabulary, style, or gestures of or subject matter. The genre that works belongs maybe to genre's own. There's a legacy of genre descriptors. And it can be contestable in terms of what you're going to say about, what fits into what particular genre of art form. The form it will take. Will it be a book, a chalk, a drawing, a song, a sculpture, a comic book? In general sense, the form is the medium that something's represented as. The idea, purpose, the impulses, the ideas, the emotions, the philosophies, the purposes of work, the work's content. Put another way, what does this work mean? What is the thesis? What insights about life, the universe, and everything does it communicate to the reader? So, this is kind of what's laid out in his book in terms of an overall framework. Then we're going to start looking at some things that he looks at a lot more specifically. So, first he makes it quite pronounced that many comic creators still measure art and writing by different standards, and they act on the faith that great art and great writing will combine harmoniously by virtue of quality alone. But as he will go through, there's much more at work than that. It's not just about putting a face together, two eyes, one nose, one mouth will make a face. There's actually a lot of science. In the book, he also goes over, spatially how things are worked out and how that works with time. And how time can be shown in terms of, a time slip, a time lapse, from 10 years, or how panels are used. So the vocabulary of comics. So icon, one of the most important terms that are used. Image used to represent a person, place, or thing. Pictorial icons. Words are totally abstract icons. That is, that they bear no resemblance at all to the real McCoy. Why is an eye called an eye? But in pictures, this level of abstraction varies. Some, like the face in the previous panel, so closely resemble their real-life counterpart as it is almost a trick to the eye. Others, like yours truly, are quite a bit more abstract and, in fact, are very much unlike any human face you've seen before. So he talks a lot about abstraction and how you get more and more abstract, how you get from the realistic image and over time you abstract it to be more iconic. So as we continue to simplify the image, we get further away from the real face of the photo. Why then is the face above so acceptable to our eyes? Why does it seem just as real as, a real picture image? What is the secret of the icon we call the cartoon? So why would anyone, young, old, respond to a cartoon as much as more realistic image? Why is our culture so enthralled to simplify reality to the cartoon? And here we just have an image from the book where he's looking at various icons, the happy face, Charlie Brown, Bart Simpson, and then we get even more involved to the Ninja Turtles. But again, it's the ability of cartoons to focus on our attention on an idea is what Scott thinks, is an idea that is special power both in comics and in drawing in general. Another is the universality of the cartoon imagery. The more cartoony a face is, for instance, the more people it could be said to describe. So as you can see, he starts out with a picture and it gets more abstract and simplified to you get like a stick figure head. In this particular grid, he's showing how the eye makes sense of patterns in order for it to translate into actual things or items. So when two people interact, they usually look directly at one another, seeing their partner's features in vivid detail. So he shows, the woman and the man looking directly at each other, then the little thought balloon's coming up. And in the thought balloon, she's seeing, exactly who she's looking at, and he's seeing exactly who's he looking at. But in reality, what Scott says is, each one also sustains a constant awareness of his or her own face, but this mind picture is not nearly so vivid, just a sketchy arrangement, a sense of shape, a sense of general placement. So in her thought balloon, she has an idea about what she's looking like, because she wants to be able to control her features when she's talking, and the same for the man. So something as simple as basic as a cartoon face. So thus, when you look at a photo or a realistic drawing of a face, you see it as the face of another. But when you enter the world of the cartoon, you see yourself. This is his argument for universality. He believes that this is the primary cause of childhood fascination with the cartoon, though other factors such as universal identification, simplicity, and childlike features of many cartoon characters also play part. So the cartoon is a vacuum into which the identity and awareness are pooled, an empty shell that we inhabit in order to travel into another realm. We don't just observe the cartoon, we become it. And then he shows, this is why he decided to draw himself more cartoony, and if he hadn't, he would obviously draw himself more realistic, and that would have made him less universal and possibly less being able to identify with him. So he's showing you why he's purposely taking on the style. So the fact that your mind is capable of taking a circle, two dots, and a line and turning them into a face is nothing short of incredible. But still more incredible is the fact that you cannot avoid seeing a face here. It's two dots and a line and a circle, yet we're reading it as a face. But what are you really seeing? It's more, he says, a concept, that it's something that is taking place of what we're expecting. So here we, he kind of outlines, complex to simple, realistic to iconic, objective to subjective, specific to universal. These are the scales or progressions that he's kind of looking at in terms of when artists choose to simplify or iconify or make more universal the face of a character or the body of a character, or in general anything. Even the setting can be made more iconic, so it can be made more universal. So there's a degree, and he shows this. There's a plane of object of there's not just, it's because it's both stylistic and you have to make stylistic choices along with iconic choices, and those together is the reason we have a pictorial vocabulary to be able to refer to the various kinds of styles people use to convey what's going on in a particular graphic novel, why they make those choices. But his main point is that they're all very, 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 very precise, and they're all purposely done. Pictures are received information we need to formal education to get the message. The message is instantaneous. Writing is perceived information. It takes time and specialized knowledge to decode the abstract symbols of language. So here we're seeing, the received information and then they're perceived. When pictures are more abstracted from reality, they require greater levels of perception, more like words. When words are bolder, more direct, they require lower levels of perception and are received faster, more like pictures. And here is just a larger graphic he gives to the various ways and the various forms and the various genres of faces and illustrative ways of conveying meaning or sense making in graphic format, in illustrative format. So again, we see the progression. So when you look at a photo or realistic drawing of a face, you see it as another face. But when you enter the world of a cartoon, you see yourself. And again, he uses himself as an example. That's why he chose to draw himself in a more iconic style or neutral or, simplified style than a more realistic style. Icons demand our participation to make them work. There is no life here except that which you give to it. So it's often what Rosenblatt says, it's the poem that's making it. A lot of people can see this icon of a face and see like a plug, like something you would plug a device into. So the readers are the ones that make sense of it. And the artist has to have faith in his ability to convey enough or simplify stylistically enough in a way that the reader is going to be able to make the sense making that's necessary. So this combination allows readers to mask themselves in a character and safely enter a sensually stimulating world. So he's showing a very simplified version of a boy with the t-shirt of a happy, well, I don't know if it's a happy face, but it's definitely a face. But argument being made that due to the simplification of this character, the reader is able to enter it. Well, you can always make the argument it's a boy and it's not a girl. So you can't make, if a female is reading this, isn't there going to be an issue in terms of being able to superimpose themselves into this environment? Yeah, you could definitely make that argument. But I think he makes a strong argument in terms of why cartoons appeal to young people in terms of their universal kind of appeal. So if visual iconography is the vocabulary of comics, closure is its grammar. And since our definition of comics hinges on the arrangement of elements, then in a very real sense, comics is closure. And we're going to go over closure a little bit. So in one of his chapters, it's called Blood in the Gutter, and of course we know what gutters are. So closure. We already know that comics ask the mind to work as a sort of in-betweener, filling in the gaps between panels as the animator might. But he argues there is still more to it than that. So this is the phenomenon observing the parts, but perceiving it as a whole has a name. It's closure. In our daily lives, we often commit closure mentally, completing that which is incomplete based on past experience. So closure can take many forms, some simple, more complex. So sometimes a mere shape or outline is enough to trigger closure. The mental process described in Chapter 2, thereby making sense of a face, could be considered closure. So every time we see a photograph reproduced in a newspaper or magazine, we commit closure. Our eyes take in the fragmented black and white image of the halftone patterns, and our mind transforms it into reality of the photograph. So in electronic media, closure is constant, even overpowering. In film, closure takes place continuously. 24 times per second, in fact, as our minds, aided by the persistence of a vision, transform a series of still pictures into a story of continuous motion. If anybody's ever made a flip book, and you've had like somebody like run on the flip book, and you know how to make a flip book, you take 24 little pages, and then you have, if you're going to do a ball, you keep the ball in one corner, and then you make it go all the way to the other corner, and when you flip it, you actually see the ball move. And that's the whole notion of it's not really moving. We drew it out. Our mind is making it move through our perception. So a medium, even more closure, is television, which in reality is just a single point of light racing across the screen so fast that it's described 100 times you can swallow a corn chip. Between such automatic electronic closure and the simpler closure of everyday life. So here we have two panels. We have a man saying no, no, and in the background we see some sort of person hitting him, and then we see yeah. So there's a gutter there, and our mind is supposed to make a leap between that gutter. So see that space between the panels? That's what comic aficionados have named the gutter. And despite its inceremonious title, the gutter plays host to much of the magic and mystery that are at the very heart of comics. Here, in the limbo of the gutter, human imagination takes two separate images and transforms them into a single idea. So, nothing is seen between the two panels, but experience tells you something much different, kind of like peekaboo. In peekaboo, we know, well, if you know childhood development, when you're a very young child, you actually do think that person disappears. As you get older, you realize they're not disappearing. They're coming back. So the peekaboo game doesn't become as, I think it's age, maybe 5 or 6, or no, maybe earlier 3. But when your perception is developed, you realize that person's not really leaving and they're coming back. So it's you're filling in that gap, and he's trying to make that connection there. Comic panels fracture both time and space, offering a jagged staccato rhythm of unconnected moments. But closure allows us to connect these moments and mentally construct a continuous, unified reality. So here we see, the first panel, person walking, then someone bending, then someone with their arms up, and then someone bending over, and then someone with their arms on their hips. But when we look at it in a continuous motion, it looks like one person who's maybe doing exercise. The closure of electronic media is largely involuntary and virtually imperceptible. But closure in comics is far from continuous and anything but involuntary. So it's something that you have to work on. It's something that's developed. When we're watching TV or we're watching film, it's imperceptible to our eyes, those gutters, those lines between. If you watch really old films, sometimes actually you do have to make those leaps. But the films today, they unless they're doing some sort of postmodern like thing where they're drawing attention to the actual form, it's imperceptible. Comic books and graphic novels, you need to make that leap. There lies a medium of communication and expression which uses closure like no other. A medium where the audience is a willing and conscious collaborator, and closure is the agent of change, time, and motion. So, this is often, the argument against belittling, comic books or graphic novels in general is that you do have to be that participant. You do have to put make those connections yourself. Pictures just don't. Pictures, they tell a story, and when you by decoding visual information, it is also helping you, in general, be a good decoder. And that works with the reading of language as well. So, here we're getting again those images. Now you die. No, no. Yeah. Every act committed to paper by this comic artist is aided and abetted by a silent accomplice, an equal partner in crime known as the reader. So we're going back to issues of transactional theory. He may have drawn an axe being raised in the example, but they're not dropping the axe, or decide how hard the blow, or who screamed, or why. That, dear reader, is the special crime that's being made, and it's being committing in your own style. So while you're seeing the antagonist in the background, and you're seeing the guy go, no, no, that there's a gutter and there's yeah, so we're making an assumption in our head that he's lowering that axe and he's hurting that person. So all of you have participated in the murder of the guy, the axe, and chose your spot of where the axe hit the guy. So the next thing that he looked at that's important to take, a quick overview of is panel-to-panel transitions, and how we transition to tell in story making. Transitions in comics can be placed in one of several distinct categories. The first category, moment to moment, requires very little closure. So we see in the first panel, the spider crawling on the guy. And then we see in the next panel, the spider a little bit more up. So it's not so big a gap that we can't make the inference that the spider is moving. So we also see, these are also panel-to-panel transitions, and we see the girl going from a sort of frown to a smile. And that's more of a, that's farther away from just, the movement of a spider. We also see panel-to-panel transitions in terms of Uranus, and we're getting, a faraway view, and then we're actually zooming out. So that's another kind of panel-to-panel transition. And action-to-action progressions. So here we're seeing in the first panel, there's just a glass being held. Then we see the glass being sipped on. Then we see the guy burp. So our eyes are making us make that story. Guy drinks glass, guy burps. That it's not being told to us. It's a story with our eyes. And the same is with the car. In the first panel, we see the car, just running, and then suddenly we see it crash. We're putting those two things together. It's that those are the same, that it's the same car. It's a suspension of disbelief. So, with the transitions featuring a single subject in distinct action-to-action progression, we see the baseball player and the ball coming at the baseball player. Then, our eyes go to him smacking it, and wham. Certainly would we, without the sound effect, think that he hit the ball? I don't know. Because if the sound effect wasn't there, then he might be swinging and missing the ball. So again, it's the science of the picture and how we decode it with our eyes. So subject-to-subject transitions. So subject-to-subject. While staying within a scene or idea, note, the degree the reader involvement is dependent and rendered through these transitions and made meaningful. And he gives the, again, goes back to the version where he shows the involvement the reader has in killing the guy in the first frame, because we only see the antagonist in the background holding the axe, saying, now you're gonna die, and then the guy saying no, no, and then the next panel, all we see is a setting shot with the sound "iya." So we're making that inference, the reader. Again, subject-to-subject transition. In the first panel, what more could go wrong? The second panel, well, at least Jerry never called. And then we see the phone ringing, inanimate object. Now we need that sound effect, or we wouldn't know that it was ringing. Then we see, again, someone finishing a race, and someone timing that race. So subject-to-subject transition. scene to scene. And what Scott says here is it's deductive reasoning that is needed in this, in the reading of comics for scene to scenes, which transport us across significant distances of time and space. And here we get he can't outrun us forever, and then we get the caption 10 years later, possibly having us think that he is actually outrunning them forever. And so scene to scene, it's also in terms of place: Bombay, Paris, New York. And we get, no one could have survived that crash. Sniff, sniff. Then far away, there's the guy that survived the crash on the island. So it's taking deductive reasoning to be able to put those various panels together, and have them make a story, or have them be relevant to one another. So transitions aspect to aspect. It passes time for the most part and sets a wandering eye on different aspects of a place or idea. So the first thing we see is a Christmas tree, and then we see Santa Claus. So it's giving us a setting. Here's another aspect to aspect. It's getting us various aspects of the setting: the sun, the man in with the sunglasses, and then the birds flying. Aspect to aspect: beer cans, and then a man belching on a woman. So we have to put these various thematic panels together to make the setting or to make the story. Now there's the non sequitur. The non sequitur, which offers no logical relationship between panels whatsoever. So, for whatever reason, these are used in graphic novels for issues of incongruence or various storytelling devices, but there's no logical connection between these two pictures of a bomb and a classic picture or pictorial representation of the farmers in front of their farmhouse. So again, non sequitur: a man saying cheese, a tree, and fish. And again, where's the connection here? Abstract piece of art, and a man with his arms up in the air doing peace. Kind of looks like Nixon. So living the line, and we'll just go over a couple of these things: how emotion is made visible, and that's through the line. And here Scott's saying that's anger. And here is tension, or intimacy, or madness, pride, or anxiety. So we went over this in picture books, the importance of line, and the importance of direction, and how diagonal lines can be dynamic and can offer chasing, while straight lines can be proud and strong. By its shape, it can be unwelcoming and severe, or warm or gentle, or rational and conservative. By its character, it can be seen savage and deadly, or weak and unstable, or honest and direct. And we see a representation of the author kind of, squiggling lines around. The most bland, expressionless line of Earth can't help but characterize their subject in some way. And while few comic artists may consider themselves expressionists, which is a movement of a style of art, that doesn't mean that they can't tell one line from the other. So here we're seeing how line is used, to connote different types of comics. In Dick Tracy, for example, Chester Gould used bold lines, obtuse angles, and heavy blacks to suggest the mood of grim, deadly world of adults. And then, with the gentle curves and open lines of Carl Buck's Uncle Scrooge, it conveys a feeling of whimsy, youth, and innocence. In R. Crumb's world, the curves of innocence are betrayed by the neurotic quill lines of modern adulthood and left painful out of place. And then in Christine's Credes, are the curves of childhood and the mad lines of Munch create a crazy toddler look. So here again we see how line is used to show various aspects of character. Putting the squiggly lines for the eyes of a character might connote, craziness. Using X's for eyes might note a sort of anonymousness. Or the vocabulary of shading the eyes could note growth of some sort, or lines to note some sort of epiphany being made. Ultimately, he shows that lines ultimately are used to show emotion and can make a character look angry to demented to sleepy to he says that looks like lust, I guess, but I don't know, not very much to me. So the next major thing that the author goes into is show and tell, and how it's important to note how graphic novels, majority of the time, the main purpose is that it's a complement of picture and word, or pictures and text, to work together to convey meaning, to show and tell. Traditional thinking has long held that truly great works of art and literature are only possible when two are kept at arm's length. His argument, of course, is that great art can be made when they are used in combination. As children, we show and tell interchangeably, words and images combining to transmit a connected series of ideas. The different ways in which words and pictures can combine in comics is virtually unlimited, but let's try to break it down to some distinct categories. So storytelling narrative devices. So first, word-specific combinations where pictures illustrate but don't significantly add a larger, largely to complete the text. And he gave some examples here. We stumbled back to the apartment shortly before dawn, vomiting every 20 yards. It's great. So he shows, he's merely showing what he's saying, which is the vomit. Or Judy gave me her keys and smiled, showing Judy smiling. The United States Constitution was adopted by the Second Continental Congress in 1978 and put into effect in 1989. And you're seeing somebody drawing with a quill. It's not really adding a lot to it. The words are far more important or highly weighted than the actual pictorial images. Then there's picture specific, where words do little more than add a soundtrack to a virtually told sequence. So here we're seeing the first panel is someone throwing a ball, and then we see balls. Then we don't see the ball. We make the conclusion that he's making a strike because we see the pins, and from off, you would say off frame, because nobody's being given the dialogue bubble, is someone saying he did it. And then we see the kissing of two people, and they're literally not saying anything to one another. We're seeing them get closer, and then finally the speech bubbles are saying which I guess is to connote that they're enjoying the kissing. But the argument is being made that the pictures are telling the story. The text is merely just kind of like, a bow, or it's not. It's just kind of, it's adding to it a little bit. It could still work without the words. And there's Jewish-specific panels in which both words and pictures send essentially the same message. So, grim-faced George lifted his lollipop. So, it's just reinforcing the picture. But the captain's mighty blow misses its intended target. Blast! He dodged my punch, and I struck this brick wall. And then I feel so sad. Not Amy. So, it's just reinforcing what the picture is already saying, or the picture is reinforcing what the text is already conveying. Then there's the additive. It's a combination where words amplify or elaborate or an image or vice versa. My head feels like a smashed pumpkin. So we see the man and he's grumbling, but the metaphor of smashed pumpkin is definitely amplifying how hard his headache is, or how bad it is, critical it is. How'd you like those new threads, babe? And so not only are we getting a pictorial image of this guy in this kind of like really, ritzy jacket, kind of cheapo jacket, but he's also using cheap language like babe. Is this the same Jupiter of my youth? So again, these are all additive, that together they're producing something, that the text and the image are working together. Then there's parallel. In parallel, combinations seem to follow very different courses without intersecting. So we see a person. If we look at the panel, the largest panel. And we'll look at the text box. Talk to Bill yet? Sally did what? The test results came back all negative? Really? That's great. Well, so we're seeing these text boxes coming from all over the various frame. So it's telling a different story. We're seeing some guy just cross some sort of passage, while the text boxes are noting a parallel narrative that's happening that we're not seeing. And then the montage, where words are treated as integral parts of the picture. And then we have interdependent. And it's possibly the most common type of word-picture combination is the interdependent, where words and pictures go hand in hand to convey an idea that neither could come alone. So we have the text box going, meanwhile, then we have a speech bubble. Did anyone see you? Then we see the man saying, this is all I need to stop him. Then we see another speech bubble. I ask you, does this guy look like CEO to you? Then we see a long shot, or an establishing shot. And just guess who drove up in Bob's truck an hour later? Hey, Marge. Oh, my God. He's lying. So, we'll move in. We'll see more of this. So, interdependent combinations aren't always an equal balance, though, and may fall anywhere on the scale between types 1 and 2. Generally speaking, the more is said with words, the more the pictures can be freed to go exploring, and vice versa. So it's a weighing act. And there's within his book, he does give a kind of exercise, and we're gonna look at it. We'll do a part of it, so you can kind of get a sense of what this balancing act is like. When pictures carry the weight or clarity in a scene, leave free words to explore a wider area. So the heavier the pictures, the freer the words. So he gives this example of showing us a woman walking across the street in the rain buying a pint of ice cream. And how can all these pictures work together to tell a narrative? Does it have to be the same narrative? Can it be a different narrative? What different narrative devices can be used? So let's say, he says, I show you a woman walking across the street in the rain to buy a pint of her ice cream, eating in it in her apartment, all in the pictures. Again, here we see. So when a scene shows you all you need, the latitude for scripting grows enormously. So we see the rain. We see her walking in the rain. We see her picking up the pint of ice cream. We see her at the counter making that transaction with the counter, and then we see her eating the ice cream. So we know it's a simple story of someone eating ice cream, but what else could be going on here? So interdependent. So just someone walking in the rain could be working as an internal monologue. I may be alone like this for a very long time. So that's adding to it. So if we go back, that woman walking in the rain, an internal monologue could easily be added to it, and therefore you get a personality trait. Then, another interdependent is that the eating of the ice cream could be made into a big advertisement. Ice cream solves everything. If we go back, we see the woman eating the ice cream there. So, could be turned into something like this with text added as such. And it becomes totally different. It conveys something totally different as if it had no language at all. No text at all. And it could also be something widely incongruous. There's a woman purchasing ice cream. And Mission Control, do you read me? Which means that would be a parallel narrative, meaning it could be somebody out in the world, up in, near the moon, trying to, get a hold of someone. And it could be something that's heard in the background in terms of being picked up by the radio, but it's something that's heard somewhere else. It's parallel. It's incongruous. It's not adding to the narrative in the sense that it's adding to her purchasing of the ice cream, but it's adding to the larger story of what's going on out in the world. So then we get to the point of, on the other hand, if the words are given without the pictures, the meaning of a sequence, could the words lock in the meaning of the sequence, then the pictures may really be able to take off. So here's another interdependent. Perhaps the artist can give us some more emotional information. So when it says I went back to the apartment after, she purchased the ice cream, it could give a picture of her crying, which would be, it would tell us this woman is upset about something, but that's not in the actual text. It's in the picture. So it's giving you more information interdependently, the emotional information. And it can also be amplification by abstraction of expression. The clerk tried to pick me up. I said no thanks. He gave me this creepy look. So as you see, it's the same text. The clerk tried to pick me up. I said no thanks. He gave me this creepy look. And it's amplified by the picture. And that certainly is a creepy look. So these are all various different kinds of devices. And he has chapter upon chapter upon it. And I just wanted to touch upon it a little bit. So the art of comics is as subtractive an art as it is additive. And finding the balance between too much and too little is crucial to comics creators the world over. So here, the art of the comic. So here's a story. So we see the two. Promise me you're going to drive safe, I promise. He's driving. Here he is. He stops at a friend's house, and he's driving again. And then he goes and he buys some beers. He drinks some beers. He crashes. And then the end, we don't even get to see the funeral. We just see the R.I.P. and Carl is dead. But can we make this shorter? Apparently we can. So, promise me you won't drive, you won't drink and drive. Be safe. says, the woman on the left, I promise. Then we see him drinking, then we see the crash, then we see the end. So look at all that was taken out to tell a very similar story. And this is what he's saying is, part of the craft of the author, part of their creativity, the aesthetic involved. So, to strike that balance, creators regularly make assumptions about their readers' experiences. Some seem pretty safe, like this assumption that this will be perceived by audiences as an eye closing. And then he makes the joke, as long as you're reading right to left. Because then if you're not, then if you're reading the opposite, then it's actually an eye opening. So, this is just a, so let's start using some of our vocabulary here. It's a grid. How many panels? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 panels. Rectangular. You're getting a Dutch angle from the beginning. You're seeing medium shot, and you close up of her eye. Then another medium shot straight on. Then we get a profile. Then we get a zoom in of her eye. Then we zoom out and get a, just the middle of her eyes. And the way of reading this is a little bit difficult. My eye naturally takes it down, to be vertical, to getting a more establishing shot of her near some sort of balcony. Then I go to the close-up of her feet, and then my eyes go to the long shot of her whole body. But then my eye goes up because of her face being blacked out, to see her face up. So it's almost, I would say this panel almost works like in a circular motion to tell the story of this one woman walking, through some sort of balcony. So here's another, we get four panels in this grid. First panel is inanimate, it's just something cooking. Then we get a close-up of a woman chopping. Then we get a kind of close-up of her face, so now we know it's a woman. It could have been a man. And then we get inanimate object just ticking away, and us making the inference that she finished, because it's ticking and you're not seeing any kind of action being made. Now this is this whole story is being told by our eyes. I mean, chop, chop, chop is language, and tick, 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 but obviously it's minimalistic use of language. It's all through visual literacy. There is a video by Michael Chaney, and he goes more into everything that I've gone into. And I will put the link on the website so you guys can watch it. Here are the sources: McCloud, Understanding Comics, Reinventing Comics, Making Comics, and various other things, Comics in the Classroom, and various things I took from visual literacy. Sorry, this was a very long lecture. And you can see that my voice is dying and I've been coughing. Thank you for sticking with me. I'm hoping that you guys will get some use out of this. And, I'll put the links up there and various resources. So, when graphic novels come up in your future, you will have it and you'll have access to it. Again, they're a very important part of our literature world, and whether they're called comics or whether they're called graphic novels, they're something that we are in the multimodal, multiliteracy world. New literacies are very, 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 very much appreciated in terms of their usage in the classroom and their ability to inspire and encourage reading.